Welcome to The Array, the podcast dedicated to delivering AI clarity for the marketing community, presented by Jacquard. Our guest today is digital advisor Scott Zalaznik. Scott is currently an angel investor and advisor to brands, services, and platforms working with startups and investor groups. Scott has a diverse digital marketing and transformation background as the former chief digital officer at Adidas, SVP of digital at Michael Kors, and GM digital at Sprint, with a stint at an NYC startup in the ad tech space. He's an American living in Europe who is passionate about all things digital, data, brand, and consumer. Welcome, Scott. It's a pleasure to have you on The Array.
Thank you so much, Toby and Jasper. It's a privilege to be here.
So yeah, we've got a lot to cover today. So why don't we get right into it? Who do you think's doing personalization well?
I don't think that there's anybody that's really nailing it. I think what we see is that there's pockets of personalization that are doing fantastic. And I like to think about personalization in kind of two buckets. You know, there's implicit and there's explicit. Implicit personalization is you don't realize that the content you're seeing is personalized. It's based on your trend, your behavior, your patterns, some algorithm. And so you see, companies that are really doing well there. You see it in social media, for example. You see it in content-based platforms. You see it in publishing. And that's because they get a lot of reads and a lot of data so that they can trend things, but you don't always know, why you're seeing what you're seeing. You just start to think that, wow, what I'm seeing is probably what everyone else is seeing, which therein lies the challenge with social media and with content personalization and implicit. Now, the second bucket is a little bit more functional, and I call that explicit personalization. And that's really when we say, or you say, hey, you're seeing this because you've done something. The classic, you might also like, or this goes together, or telling a consumer that they're seeing this because they did something. And you really see different industries specializing there. Certainly retail, certainly telecom, auto, fintech, et cetera. And I really see that there's a huge amount of brands that are doing great space in those different pockets. But I think, if you try to stream it all together, I can't name one company.
It kind of comes back to being creative. Do you think there's a world where a lot of brands are focused on just being able to tick the box of saying that they're personalized and not necessarily focusing on the real benefit of it, which is about being creative with how they interact with their customers?
You'll never meet a company that doesn't want to be consumer obsessed. And they say they are, and I believe that they mean they are. It's more that personalization is something that is very difficult to execute. So what I think you'll find is that most brands have some level of personalization, whether it's in email or whether it's in channel, customer service, retail, et cetera. The real trick, though, is how do you stream those things together so that the consumer has a consistent expectation and that they consistently see that you recognize who they are, you recognize what they've offered you in terms of their preferences, and you pull that through. If I give you in an opt-in way my name and you welcome me to your loyalty program or to your CRM or whatever it might be, is, hey, welcome, Scott. It's great to have you in the family or whatever it might be. I think that's a fantastic tactic. If you then use my name in every subject line of every invoice or order or something of that nature, it actually ends up feeling disingenuous. I think that's a perfect example where sometimes a tactic can give a strategy a bad name.
You're almost suspicious about a brand's use of your data if they're not using it to personalize that experience.
If you ask for the information, you should really have a plan to leverage it. And we might even tell the consumer how we're going to leverage it.
Making sure your kind of data is in order and you're collecting the right stuff allows you to optimize to the right metrics rather than the kind of myopic, okay, well, this language worked and I got the click, but you're not really measuring anything else.
I tell you, I think there hasn't been a single topic that has been more difficult, inspiring, and educational for me through my career than the incentivization of KPIs or OKRs.
What are the right success metrics?
It's really important to think through, what would success really look like? I think in your world, it's, how do we not just over optimize ourselves to death with language that drives some conversion of CTR or open rate or whatever it might be versus, how is a brand leveraging your technology to enhance the language that they use in a incremental way that actually allows the consumer to start to kind of feel the tone of that brand. And that may underconvert an individual email or a season of whatever. But I think you've really got to look for, like, what are those things I'm trying to do that are brand enhancing, and what are those things that I'm trying to do that are performance enhancing?
If you send an email and all you're tracking is open rate, and one has a better open rate and one has maybe versus a human control a worse open rate, but your unsubscribe rate, let's say, is half the one with the lower engagement rate, right? And so more people are sticking around. They're not kind of annoyed by your brand. Just knowing that extra data point completely flips which one you would consider a success.
You need a hierarchy of KPIs. If you send an email that triggers unsubscription rates, that is a red alert. You know, I used to say, like, the siren should be going off in the halls.
I find there's a lot of risk associated with personalization. I think it's so obvious when you get it wrong. It's more obvious when you get it wrong than when you get it right. So you really need to think about how you can gain extra user feedback. Like, a lot of brands are afraid of asking too many questions because of, like, user experience challenges. We kind of need that explicit information from the user in order to make sure that the implicit personalization doesn't fall down.
I'm always for, you know, can we in the moment get super simple feedback from somebody? Yeah. This was good, or this was not so good.
And, you know, one thing that we think about, and how can brands apply different use of language to benefit the consumer. And if a streaming platform could describe a movie in a way using natural language that takes into account someone's interest and preferences and requires that point that you both were just talking about, and actually knowing if they liked the movie that they actually just watched rather than just watched it. Mm-hmm. But you apply that to e-commerce and retail, where products are described in a way that is individualized, it's personalized, and it can say, hey, these shoes really go with that hat that you got last week, right? And it kind of completes the set. And I think that is a really interesting frontier to what generative AI can provide, that allows brands to speak in their brand voice, but to individualize that content to that person in, I think, a place that hasn't really been touched by personalization before. It's also very brand specific. You know, it's not like you can learn the way to speak to Gen Z for every brand, right? The brand's way to speak to Gen Z is unique to that brand. That answer is different for Adidas as it is for Apple.
I think on the brand side, you know, it's an easy excuse to not do personalization of language because you think, well, my brand ethos or my brand language, whether you're Apple or whatever, is very special to your brand, and it has there's things that you say and there's things that you don't say, and there's language that can be trained into a model, just like we train all kinds of things into a model. Now, when you then say that the Jacquard or whomever AI company has said that, you know, we've also identified trends at a brand agnostic level based on demographic or based on gender or based on age or whatever it might be, then you start to apply those things together. And I think that's where the real magic happens.
But also accepting that we're communicating with individuals. So it might be that, you know, what works for me from a, you know, brand agnostic perspective may not work for you. And yes, we want to stay true to our brand and we want to stay true to our brand ethos. Like, maybe we need to take a little bit of a leap in some situations, and in order to get that insight and get that understanding about the people that we're talking to. If we keep staying in our lane, then we're never really going to learn anything. We're never really going to learn if we're actually missing the mark or not.
Companies like yourselves need to think about, you know, how do you introduce your technology in a way that allows a brand to see what types of optimizations are going to occur, because it's not worth it to, you know, improve my open rate or to, you know, improve my conversion of whatever my KPI is, to lose, you know, what is closest to me, which would be my brand. And so, but the good news is you don't have to make a choice. The good news is the technology is allowing you to take brand agnostic learnings and machine learning capability and apply it into brand specific standards and language. And I think that's the key.
Join us for the next episode of The Array. We'll be discussing whether marketers need to protect their brand from AI messaging risks. And we'll be joined by Jay Pattersall, who's the VP Principal Analyst at Forrester. And please remember to like and subscribe to The Array wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts.